politically, socially, and philosophically. Legislative trends. You in the EU have made a fair number of changes recently. The new animal experimentation directive, new directives and regulations relating to animals in agriculture. Okay, so, I mean, and I guess, really, there's what, only one? Well, that's not true. There are a couple of common law countries in the EU, but they're mostly not, okay? But I mean, if I were in England, I could point to this, okay, trend in legislation as being favorable toward changing the personhood status of animals. In the United States, unfortunately, I probably couldn't do that because, to be perfectly honest, we haven't done much legislating, okay? Certainly not at the federal level. Federal level in the United States, nothing happens, okay? State level, there have been some things, some good, some not so good, okay? Like California has passed some laws relating to agricultural animals that are favorable, if you want to look at it that way, favorable to agricultural animals. There are some states, though, that are passing laws that are not so good toward animals, like ag-gag laws that basically prevent people from, or try to prevent people from exposing abuses in animal agriculture, okay? So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is trends in legislation, you could argue both ways. That the rule was originally wrong, okay, I would just say yes, it was in the first place, okay, and for all of the sorts of reasons that I've been talking about. Okay? So, could we argue for change in the common law status of animals? And the answer, I think, is yes. And it is, in fact, being done. Not necessarily on exactly the bases that I have suggested, but it is being done. It's being done in the Non-Human Rights Project, which is the president of which is Steve Wise. And if you ever have the opportunity to talk to Steve Wise or see him talk somewhere, or you should certainly go to the Non-Human Rights Project website online. If you ever have the opportunity to see him or talk to him or whatever, you should do so, okay? Because what he's doing is really quite outstanding and amazing, okay? And I told you, what he is doing, okay, is he is trying to move some chimps. There's 3 lawsuits in the state of New York. Move some chimps, 4 of them, from the status of property to the status of person. Okay? And what he wants to do is have them be granted certain rights, one of which is personal or bodily integrity, that is not to be confined, and the other is liberty, that is not to be touched in some way, not in the best interest of the person. Now, how is it that this argument is being made? Well, it's essentially being made from the perspective that these chimps have certain characteristics that we would characterize as autonomy. They have a sense of the future, they're rational, they have emotional lives, all of these things. That, in other words, they have all of the characteristics that persons have in our traditional common law definition of what a person is. And since they fit within what the traditional common law definition of a person, then they ought to be treated by the law as persons. That's the idea, okay? Now, specifically, the legal argument that is being made is based on the common law writ of habeas corpus, okay? This is a legal writ that developed in the common law. And the writ of habeas corpus is quite simple. It is a writ that allows one to argue that someone is in unlawful detention and should be released from that unlawful detention. Okay? And it was originally created as a remedy for people who were held by the government illegal. That was the idea. And this writ of habeas corpus, by the way, can be used by a third person to get somebody else out. So in other words, if I think you are being unlawfully detained, I can file a writ of habeas corpus to try to get you released from unlawful detention. So you see how this works? This concept of habeas corpus has been extended beyond the government. In other words, non-police actors have been held to be subject to a writ of habeas corpus. In other words, a private person that is unlawfully detaining somebody can be subject to a writ of habeas corpus and be ordered to release that person. Okay? So you see how this works here with what is being done in New York. The lawsuits allege that these chimps, who are all held by private entities, these chimps are being unlawfully detained. They are persons who are entitled to certain rights, one of which is to be free from unlawful detention. And therefore, they, as persons, should now be released from this unlawful detention. That's the argument that's being made. And remember, it's being made as a common law argument. They're saying, and all of these arguments can be made that we've been talking about. These chimps actually fit into what? The traditional definition of person. Okay? And if they don't, then they ought to be. Okay? All of these kinds of arguments can be made in a common law court. Okay? Now, there's one other aspect of this suit that's you might be interested in knowing. And that is another argument that's being made. And I don't know whether there are laws like this in Europe. When I was at the conference not long ago in Barcelona, I seem to hear some people say that there is sort of this kind of concept maybe somewhere in Europe. But last time I checked, 46 states in the United States have what are called pet trust laws, okay, or companion animal trust laws. And by the way, these laws are relatively recent. They didn't exist, 30 years ago. Or if they did, there were only a few at that time. Now 46 states, maybe even more, have these laws. And the law says this. Effectively what it does is it allows you to set up a trust. That is, you can set money aside for a companion animal of yours. And I mean, the typical way you use this is in connection with your will or whatever, you set up a trust for your pet, dog, cat, horse, whatever, okay? You set up a trust, you set money aside to care for this animal after you are no longer able to do so or you are dead, okay? So there's specific statutes that allow you to set up trusts like this, okay? So in the way trust law works, there is a trustee, a person who manages the money, and there is a beneficiary. The beneficiary here being the animal, okay? And the trustee manages the money for the animal. These pet trust laws allow you to set up a trust for the benefit of an animal, okay? And guess what? In the Non-Human Rights Project, they set up trusts for the benefit of these animals. They have a legal right to do that, okay? And so they did this, okay? And then the argument they made was, look, beneficiaries of trusts have always traditionally been what? Persons. And the New York legislature has created this law where animals can be beneficiaries of trust. So they must be persons. Okay? So this is another way that the argument is being made. This is not a common law way. This is a statutory way that the argument is being made that these chimps are persons. Now, you might ask, so where is all this? Okay? Well, the last time I checked, which was just a few days ago, these 3 lawsuits were filed. At the trial court level, the very lowest court level, the Non-Human Rights Project lost. Okay, they said, no, we're not issuing a writ of habeas corpus. We're not doing this. We're not declaring these chimps to be persons. Okay, and nobody expected the result to be different, actually. Okay, so where are things now? These cases are on appeal. They are in New York appellate courts at this very moment. Okay. And, the appellate court process will go on and there will be decisions from the appellate court and so on. And the Non-Human Rights Project intends to continue with this process. If it doesn't work in these cases, then they'll try other cases. And so, okay, in a very concrete way, there are efforts to move animals from the category of property to the category of person. Now, I promised you I was going to try to tie this back into my universal principles idea again, and I'm going to try to do it now in a concrete way. But the concrete way that I do it is that I just throw it out to you, okay? I come from a common law perspective. And in Finland, as I understand it, you have a civil law perspective. Is there anything in this discussion relating to personhood from the common law perspective? Are there principles, are there ideas that come from that that we can talk about at a level above civil law and common law, and at a level at which perhaps you can use in civil law countries some of these ideas? Can we discuss this issue across these different legal systems? Is there something in this that could be used in civil law countries, either judicially or in legislative proposals or whatever? Can we use any of these ideas, okay, across these different legal systems, okay, in another way of talking about these issues universally? And so I just leave you with that question, and thank you for your attention.